Hi, this video is about how to use low-dose lithium orotate to treat depression and bipolar disorder. The advantage to using a super low dose of lithium from lithium orotate is that there are no toxic side effects compared to the high dose of lithium carbonate that's prescribed in conventional psychiatric medicine. But the question is a low dose of lithium orotate strong enough to control bipolar disorder and depression? Well, I believe that a low dose of lithium from orotate can be strong enough to provide a really powerful therapeutic effect sufficient to assist you control your bipolar disorder. Because I have bipolar disorder myself and I take 10 milligrams of lithium a day from lithium orotate and I feel great on it. It provides a really good therapeutic stabilizing effect on me. I have no hand tremors, no weight gain, no loss of libido or emotional flattening or numbness or anything else. I feel fine on it. I'm going to explain 5 things that you can combine with the lithium orotate to enhance its effectiveness, to maximize what it's doing for you so that that low dose goes a long way. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I'll explain to you how you can get a free MP3 recording to give you a technique that you can use to enhance lithium's effects in you. My name's Peter Smith. I practice as a functional medicine practitioner, specializing in using non-drug natural remedies and self-help techniques for the treatment and management of mental health problems. If this kind of video and information interests you, then you can subscribe to this channel or follow me on whatever social media you're watching this on, and also go over to my website balancingbrainchemistry.co.uk, where you'll find a lot more information on this subject. Okay, let's get into it. If I talk really fast, that's not because I'm in a manic state, it's because I'm trying to keep the time down, respect your time, and shorten the videos. First thing to say is, remember, lithium is not actually a drug. It's a nutritionally essential mineral with profound effects on the health of the brain that psychiatric medicine discovered, if you take it at a very high dose, can have a stabilizing effect on bipolar disorder and a therapeutic effect on treatment-resistant and chronic long-term depression. Now, the question you should ask is, why are you thinking about taking lithium in the first place? I mean to say, what properties or effects does lithium have that you want or need help with in your brain? A common finding in brain scans of the depressed and bipolar depressed brain is that there is a lack of activity in specific regions of the brain, the hippocampus and the cortex. Literally, brain function is depressed on many levels. This is a PET scan of a brain in a non-depressed state versus a depressed state that you can easily find online. Yellow and red indicate levels of activity or increased levels of activity, and you can see in the depressed state there's just globally all over greatly diminished levels of activity. Brain activity is not just metaphorically, it is actually physically depressed. Now, one of the ways that there is reduced activity in the depressed brain is in what's called the second messenger system. The second messenger system carries signals within a nerve cell, in contrast to the neurotransmitters that pass across the synaptic space or the gaps between the nerve cells into the second nerve, receiving nerve, that then conveys it along within itself, again by the second messenger system. Lithium upregulates an underactive second messenger system. Interestingly, lithium also downregulates a hyperactive second messenger system that occurs in the bipolar manic state. So lithium is one smart little mineral. One of the main things involved in the second messenger system is a chemical called inositol or myo-inositol. What you can do to enhance the upregulation of the second messenger system that lithium is providing is supplement with the B vitamin inositol. If you have bipolar disorder, you would only take it in the depression phase and immediately stop if you're going into a manic state, or if you have a tendency to really extreme mania or really rapid cycling, or a very rapid transition from a depressed state into a manic state, you might think about not taking inositol at all ever, unless it turns out that you're actually suicidally depressed, in which case you need all the rescuing help that you can get. If you're in a unipolar depressed state though, or chronic long-term depression, by all means experiment with supplementing inositol in powder form. It's an extremely safe nutrient. And you can try doses anything from 6 grams right the way up to 18 grams. Although once you start getting over about 13, 14 grams of inositol, you can, in some people, start to get some pretty icky kind of digestive symptoms, loose bowels, gas, and so on and so forth. A particularly interesting observation from the scientific studies is that supplementing inositol appears to have a much stronger antidepressant effect on women suffering from polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, if you're a guy, don't think, oh, well, then it's not going to help me because I haven't got ovaries. Look, it's still worth experimenting with. You could be one of the rare ones, or it might be that there's actually a common genetic factor that both men and women can have that in women would manifest as polycystic ovarian syndrome, but not manifest as something that's so readily identifiable in men. And as with anything, with the natural remedies, and the whole basis of my practice is personal experimentation, self-help personal experimentation done in a safe way. I just want to reiterate, if you have bipolar disorder, you should be very, very careful indeed experimenting with anything that has an antidepressant effect. That doesn't mean to say, in my opinion, that you should never take anything that's antidepressant, because the bipolar depression can kill you, and so sometimes you might want to take a remedy. I'm just saying, take it carefully, and also make sure that you've got plenty things that you're taking to dampen down the manic side at the same time as taking an antidepressant remedy to be safe. And that neatly segues me into the second tip, which is that lithium dampens down excess glutamate activity. This pertains really only to bipolar brains, not to unipolar depressed brains. One of the things that happens in the bipolar brain all the time, and very much so in periods of mania, is the neurotransmitter glutamate accumulates and builds up inside the synaptic spaces. If you want to learn more about that, see my other video on how lithium affects the brain. Glutamate is a stimulatory neurotransmitter. It ramps up the level of activity within the brain. It's what drives that really speeded upness that you get during periods of mania, talking too quickly, thinking too quickly, racing thoughts, and so forth. And lithium increases the clearance rate of the glutamate out of the synapse into neighboring cells, which are called glial cells, and also the reabsorption of the glutamate back into the original transmitting neuron. But there are additional remedies that have the same or similar effects. These include zinc, NAC-cysteine, magnesium, and riboflavin, although I'm not so sure about that. Vigorous exercise, physical exercise I mean, also enhances the clearance rate of glutamate from the synaptic spaces. Therapeutic ranges for zinc start at around about 30 milligrams up to about 60, so yeah, pretty high doses. You have to think about what's happening to your to your copper levels and iron levels when you're taking that much zinc, and you really shouldn't go over 90 milligrams on a long-term basis, because that will wipe out your copper and iron and cause toxicity. Some forms of zinc are much better absorbed than others, and whatever you do, don't take zinc on an empty stomach. It'll really make you feel nauseated. NAC-cysteine is a really interesting remedy. It has multiple effects. In terms of bipolar, if you take a low dose divided through the day, like 600 milligrams and 600 milligrams morning and evening, the anti-glutamate accumulating effects tend to be the predominant feature. If, however, I take 1,200 milligrams, which is the same dosage, but altogether in one go in the morning, it produces a stronger, more overwhelming, dopaminergic, enhancing effect, and can actually start pushing me up into mania. So higher doses, less frequently, of NAC or antidepressant, whereas lower doses, more evenly distributed, have a glutamate clearing and anti-mania effect. Magnesium therapeutic doses start around about 400 to 800 milligrams a day. If you have good kidneys, you're going to do well on the higher doses, but if you have kidney issues, perhaps you've even been on lithium carbonate for some time and it has already compromised your kidney function, then I would keep towards the lower end of using magnesium as a supplement. But whatever you do, do not be magnesium deficient. If you're deficient in magnesium, and it's very common, there's all kinds of bad neurological effects. You can't control stress physiology in the system, and you get inflammation ramped up in the brain, and this can really encourage depression. It's one of the known things that can cause depression. The remedies I've just mentioned work to help control excess glutamate by increasing the clearance rate from inside the synapses, but there are additional strategies you can use to control excess glutamate activity in the bipolar brain. You can use glycine, D-serine, and sarcosine. They increase the activity in the NMDA receptors. And the science of how that's working is really complicated, but there seems to be a lack of activity of the NMDA receptors in certainly the schizophrenic brain, bipolar type 1, and I took that research and wondered if, in my case, one of the symptoms I had was paranoia, social paranoia, so like a hypervigilance about potential threat. It was a very, very uncomfortable feeling. And because paranoia is common in schizophrenia, and I had paranoia, I wondered if, instead of taking glycine occasionally when I needed it, if I took it continuously, might that have some beneficial effects. And I was delighted to find that it completely switched off that horrible remaining symptom I had of paranoia. Even years after I'd gotten many other aspects of my bipolar completely under control, I still had that paranoia. And then last but not least is the amino acid taurine. Now, taurine doesn't have any direct glutamate effect, but it does have a GABAergic effect, and GABA counterbalances glutamate activity. Taurine also stimulates neurogenesis, which is the growth of new cells inside the hippocampus. And in the depressed brain, and bipolar, manic and depressed brain, you lose cells in the hippocampus. So taurine is a doubly beneficial remedy. Okay, so that was the second tip, taking remedies that enhance lithium's ability to clear glutamate from the synapses in the bipolar brain. Now for the third tip. One of the significant things that lithium does for the depressed and bipolar brain is it reduces inflammation. We now know that chronic inflammation is one of the driving forces behind depression. It literally strips out synapses more quickly than you can replace them, and also disrupts particularly serotonin metabolism, but probably or quite possibly other neurotransmitters as well. And the diminished levels of synaptic connections and serotonin and so forth is what gives rise to depression. Interestingly, inflammation is also elevated during periods of mania, so you've got everything to play for to combat inflammation. Unfortunately, everything to do with brains is complicated. There are some people, more exceptional people I would say, that have depression where there is not inflammation. In fact, such people will do worse on an anti-inflammatory strategy. There are two ways you can test this hypothesis. One is you could go and have a blood panel to see if you've got inflammatory markers such as elevated C-reactive protein, CRP, and IL-6, interleukin 6, and so forth. The other is you can actually just suck it and see, which was the way I always did it. I would take a stack of remedies to reduce inflammation and see if it made my depression better or worse. Now, chronic inflammation in the brain can come from many, many sources, and you should eliminate every single one of them. Let me tell you about the most common ones, the big ones. First is chronic stress responses ramp up inflammation in the brain. When there is overactivity of stress and perception of threat and traumatic psychology, overactivating the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal pathway that then discharges excessive amounts of cortisol, especially nighttime cortisol, that ramps up inflammation in the brain. And if you want to get a free recording, MP3 recording, to teach you how to switch off overactivity in your HPA axis, go to my website balancingbrainchemistry.co.uk, and then you can find out how you can get a hold of that. The second thing that really ramps up inflammation in the brain is our modern diet contains far too much omega-6 oils. Omega-6 oils are found in rapeseed oil, corn oil, sunflower seed oil, sesame seed oil. All those nice frying oils that have a high smoking point are awful in terms of your brain health, actually, and the rest of your body. So throw them all down the sink and have only coconut fat and olive oil in your kitchen. Avoid other sources of omega-6 coming at you, such as takeaway food. There's plenty omega-6 which the brain does need in just natural foods, nuts, seeds, meats, some vegetables, olive oil are all awash with omega-6. Reduce your omega-6 intake intake and then specifically supplement EPA. EPA competes with and counteracts omega-6. In a sense, EPA exerts a controlling effect over omega-6. But if your omega-6 is already through the roof, you just couldn't take enough EPA to control it. EPA also produces anti-inflammatory prostaglandins in its own right. If you find that playing around with a low omega-6, high EPA diet combined with lithium is a particularly effective strategy for you, you might want to push it a little bit by taking a low-dose junior enteric-coated aspirin. Now, you shouldn't take other non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs with lithium at the same time, but aspirin does actually appear to be an exception. In fact, when aspirin is combined with high-dose lithium carbonate, pharmaceutical lithium carbonate, there's some evidence that it may give protective effects. But before you just put yourself onto aspirin, because even the enteric-coated aspirin can still cause gastric bleeding, please go and have a discussion with your doctor about doing that. What aspirin does is it blocks the formation of inflammatory chemicals called prostaglandins from the fatty acid arachidonic acid, and this combination of lithium, EPA and low-dose aspirin enhances the anti-inflammatory eicosanoid effects. Another dietary therapeutic approach that you can adopt to enhance the effectiveness of lithium, particularly we're talking about the anti-inflammatory effects of lithium, is to eat a diet containing a huge amount of brightly colored plant foods. The bright colors in plant foods are polyphenols, and there's a subcategory of polyphenols called flavonoids, which have powerful anti-inflammatory and antidepressant effects. Now, there is a situation where you shouldn't eat a diet rich in plant foods, which is if you've got small intestine bacterial overgrowth or SIBO. You're going to know that you've got that because you're going to get a lot of bloating when you eat a lot of flavonoids and smoothies and so forth. SIBO is a real infection, and that's going to ramp up inflammation levels in your body. It also causes leaky gut, where you get bacterial passing through the gut wall, and they're going to activate your immune system, and that's going to ramp up inflammation. I've got a whole video about flavonoids, their antidepressant effects, and when not to take them because you've got SIBO. That video is called Which Foods Increase Happiness, and there's the thumbnail to look out for. The other thing you can do to enhance lithium's anti-inflammatory effects is to take a stack of natural remedies that also reduce inflammation. And there's a lot of them, too many to mention and actually too many to take. In my practice, the way I design a manageable stack of anti-inflammatory remedies is I'm looking for remedies that are not just anti-inflammatory but have some other property that I specifically want in that person. So if we're looking for dopamine and inflammation, then I want the anti-inflammatory dopaminergic remedies stacked together, or it could be serotonergic, or it might be other things, BDNF producing or whatever. Okay, moving on to point number 4. Studies in the 70s and 80s, but our brains haven't changed since then, show that during periods of bipolar mania, the metal vanadium, which we get from our diet, builds up in the bipolar brain. And one of the effects of lithium is to counteract vanadium buildup. Another thing that you can take to flush vanadium out of the system is simply vitamin C. 3 grams once a day, and you want to just take actually cheap ascorbic acid. Like, doesn't need to be one of those like special bioavailable forms. We want to just flood the blood with cheap ascorbic acid, flush out vanadium so that it doesn't build up in our body. You could take this on a long-term prophylactic basis, 3 grams a day, if you have a tendency to keep going up into mania. Or you could reserve it for times when you're beginning to speed up, or just during periods of mania, and then really flush it out quickly to shorten the episode. Something you must be careful with vitamin C is that it really can change insulin levels. So if you're a diabetic and on medication, it's not that you couldn't take the vitamin C, but you're going to have to monitor yourself and adjust your dosage of medication. Another thing actually you should watch out for is if it does actually just push your blood sugar up. So I recommend if you're going to take 3 grams of vitamin C a day that you buy a blood sugar meter, take your blood sugar before, take the vitamin C for a while, take it afterwards and see if it's having a negative effect on you. If not, keep taking it. There's actually some evidence that vitamin C's ability to quench oxygen free radicals is neuroprotective, particularly for schizophrenia and possibly bipolar also. Moving on to tip number 5 now, which is that lithium boosts neuroplasticity to help restore lost synaptic connections and brain volume in structures including the cortex, anterior cingulate cortex, the hippocampus, that brain scans have shown lose volume during periods of depression and over a long period of time with bipolar disorder. There are numerous other things that you can do to enhance neuroplasticity, including, again, eating a very high flavonoid diet, but also the timing of how we eat. Every day practice at least a minimum of 12 hours intermittent fasting. That means if you have breakfast at 8, you have to finish dinner at 8. You can go 9 to 9, 10 to 10 if you wanted, a bit late, but 12 hours overnight fasting. If you can push it all the way up to 15 hours, good for you. Another thing is physical exercise, but not all exercises are the same. To boost neuroplasticity, it has to be actually vigorous physical exercise. Aerobic, good, but much, much stronger is what's called HIIT exercise, where you do very short bursts of very high intensity exercise, as little as 30-second bursts. 3 of those strung together with little gaps will actually produce more BDNF and have a bigger effect on your neuroplasticity than, say, like gently jogging or gently swimming for an hour. Obviously, if your fitness level isn't up to doing intensive exercise, then don't start there. Build yourself up, go to a trainer, consult with your physician if you have cardiovascular conditions. Be safe. Another proven technique for boosting neuroplasticity and stimulating the regrowth of lost synaptic connections that occur with depression and bipolar disorder is meditation. The science is telling us that you produce the maximum neuroplastic change when you do an exercise that's very demanding. So I want my meditation, and in my practice I teach very demanding style meditations where you engage for short periods of time in hyper focus on various mindfulness exercises. What we want to do is, rather like in the gym, you exercise a muscle to the point where it burns. We want to do the mindfulness to the point where it almost gives you a headache, so that we can stimulate and pinpoint and focus activity in the cortex, anterior cingulate cortex, insula and hippocampus and so forth. Really get that, like going to brain gym. I've got some other videos explaining my style of meditation, and if you think that's something that interests you, I teach classes online, small group classes. You can go to my website and find out details about those. So that's it for now. I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, and I'd love to hear your comments. Especially what's helpful for me is if you leave comments telling me what you liked and what you'd like to see more of, and I'll try to make videos answering your questions. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.